Hello and welcome to Reimagining Cyber. Producer Ben here, and we're going to have another one of those discussions where I quiz our normal host, the cyber expert, Rob Aragao. Rob, how are you doing?
All is well, Ben. How are you?
Yeah, not bad. And we haven't actually spoken since, 2024 went into 2025. We're talking now on the 14th of January. This goes out on the 15th. I think today is actually technically the last day that you can say Happy New Year to someone.
Is that right? Okay.
I don't know if that's legal. I don't know, but something on those lines.
Well, guess what then? Let's do it. Happy New Year, Ben. And Happy New Year to everyone joining us on the podcast.
Don't you say Happy New Year in the States? Is that how you say it? Is that kind of
Happy New Year? We do. Absolutely.
Catchy. Anyway, none of this is getting us anywhere. Tell me, what is on the agenda for today?
Well, being a new year, Ben, I was thinking as we closed out last year and the previous year, 2023, 2024, we had Roland Cloutier come on. And I had some really great conversations with Roland in the past. And we focused kind of both of those year-end episodes on perspective around where cybersecurity teams, organizations, leaders should be actually considering to invest within maturing their cyber capabilities, right? And Roland does a great job in going through that. So I won't steal the thunder of that previous episode. But what I did think about is that translation into another topic around the role of cybersecurity within organizations from a business sense perspective, and how it's truly evolved into something that we've very much emphasized and focused on within the podcast around the business logic aspect and the business value interpretation being so critical for the kind of, new age and again, evolution in the role of those that lead cybersecurity parts of their organization. So traditionally the CISO role, right? The Chief Information Security Officer. And so as you think about that, Ben, historically, the CISO's kind of purview has been around really identifying and mitigating cybersecurity risks that could impede the business operations in general, which is still core to their role. But you have to also really kind of amplify that with now the business logic, the business sense aspect. And as you know, right, we've had folks on the calls with us in the past discuss this that joined in the podcast, from Jim Routh to Parmak Davari and others that helped us in many cases emphasize this topic, but it's been quite some time. And so what I thought is just use this as an opportunity, brand new year, start thinking this way right out of the gates. It's critically important within, again, that not just the role of the CISO, but anyone, I think, in general coming into cybersecurity, to understand how you marry the technology with whatever the business operations that you're tied into, no matter, again, what vertical you're actually connected with as well. And so an aspect of that is, looking at what are the opportunities that you would have to enabling the business agility. So a lot of that ties back into, right, you're looking for opportunities where you actually have a path to maybe enabling growth for the business. That could be around how in the early stages of whatever the new project initiative may be for the business or set of initiatives, ensuring that cyber teams are part of those conversations at the onset, ensuring that security principles are being reviewed, assessed, and baked in to the new product or service launches as they go forward, and not at either the tail end or after the fact of it actually being rolled out. Because again, we've seen many different negative ramifications of when that's actually happened. The other aspect of agility comes into play as we have to figure out how with cyber, we're actually reducing friction. And a key aspect of that we've actually discussed quite frequently is around the development teams, right? Writing the applications that are going to, again, potentially deliver new revenue streams, support existing revenue streams for a business, and the role that cybersecurity plays within that. And historically, it's been around checking the development of the application at some point in time, or as close maybe as it is to the end, and saying, hey, there are these cybersecurity defects relative to the application within the code. Here you go, please go back and fix it. And there is friction, major friction that happens because developers are running as quickly as possible to get this released. And cyber's kind of putting up a hurdle at that point in time. So that pivot that we've been emphasizing for quite some time across the industry, around a shift left methodology is, in essence, again, getting up and in front as much as possible. And a way to remove friction, as an example, is really taking the application security tools, processes, and baking them into the development tools and processes. So that way the developers are developing secure software and driving that through where security is doing the checks and balances, governing, in essence, that the application is truly secured to spec and allow it to go out the door and release. So streamlining that delivery. So that's one area that I think needs to be thought about in greater depth. That interconnects a bit into, again, that business aspect around how do you help drive revenue and growth for the business you support. And there's a few different things to think about. One is, by protecting customer trust, you are able to obviously drive and attract more customers, right? Because they'll be basically proponents for whatever products or services you have. And one of the ways to do that, again, a key theme we discussed very heavily last year, especially, is ensuring customer data privacy and security of the customer data and the reasons why you have specific customer data. That's critically important. Regulations help you drive towards the programs to put in place to support that. But again, it all comes down to you being able to properly ensure that whatever you're collecting for consumer data, such as mine or yours, Ben, is properly being protected as one of those aspects, right? Another area in this area of revenue growth is fully understanding, really, how do you mitigate the financial actual losses? So we go through all these different, ways of assessing and trying to put in the right controls to protect and secure our environments, to mitigate against these different attacks. We all know things will still continue to happen. How do you go through that review and understanding of what some of those different types of security incidents could attribute to in regards to financial loss, significant financial loss? So it could be, again, a major data breach and the cost ramifications on the investigation process, right? All of the work that goes through and actually getting you back on track, and then all the cleanup efforts after the fact, and then the kind of indirect costs around the impact of the brand, the shareholder value, right? The market impacts and all of those things, and legal costs, of course, as well. So that's another area, and then operational efficiency. That kind of connects the dots back into, we need to understand how to better streamline processes. And a good example I just shared was, again, working security in early with development as part of their tooling, their people, and their process aspect of that.
Rob, there's an awful lot of info to digest there, all of which is incredibly important. But the key thing is communicating that to the relevant stakeholders. That's the CISO's job. How is that done?
That's a great question. And I think that is the key to success, is how you communicate that to the key stakeholders. So we talk about this, continue to build, a strong culture of security. That's kind of, the one-on-one stuff. You just have to continuously build security into the foundation and culture of an organization. You need executive leadership to support that. But the way you get there is you need to understand that when we're talking to executive leadership, when we're having an opportunity to have, as I say, 7 minutes in the agenda with the board, you're not talking in technical vernacular. You are using understandable business terms. You are using terms, as we discussed and emphasized many times within the podcast, resilience as an aspect. Operational resilience is something that is well known, well understood, well measured by the board, by executive leadership teams. Cyber resilience, when we went to that type of phrasing a few years ago, started being actually one that was better understood. And then as you explain cyber resiliency as an example of saying, here's what we're doing, is assessing, understanding what the key digital assets are within our operations, within our business, and the criticality of each of those, to prioritize them in an effort to be able to better secure and protect them. We understand, though, unfortunately, that things will still happen. Security incidents will occur. When they do, we have the right control mechanisms in place, processes in place to minimize the impact of the security events, while also driving the recovery process to the best efficiency as possible. And the fourth kind of aspect of that is we take everything we just learned from this go around and this issue or incident we just dealt with to put it back into the cycle of learning and bettering what we're doing. And a lot of that then ties into, okay, great. So if you kind of get that connection point of resiliency, then what's next? Next starts getting into the financial modeling. How do we actually talk about the value from a financial perspective, the return on investment, which is very, very difficult, don't get me wrong, to measure, especially in cybersecurity, as it relates to the demonstrated capabilities around how it's protecting the organization, how it's preventing the security, incidents from occurring, how it's improving efficiency on the operational side of the house, how it's improving and supporting and removing friction of the business operational aspects, right? So you have to start working and looking at the numbers side of it, and that's a big change for many people in technology in general. I think it's one that the CIO role evolved into probably at this point, 10 years ago, if not longer. But that was kind of like the light bulb moment of when, the realization came into place of how technology drives, obviously, business opportunity, but the mechanism of assessing and measuring the financial aspects are critically important to that. And that is now really starting to hit more of the cybersecurity role side of it. And kind of a good way to start doing that is, we discussed this, I think with Tammy Klotz actually is a great example of this. Is she moved from, one organization to another. And one of the first things she obviously did, and even for her, I think she mentioned it was part of the interview process, which is all about preparation. Who are the people I'm going to be talking to? How much intel can I get on them? And how can I connect the dots to show them value? When I get into the organization, because she was hired in as an example, how does she then, continue to elevate and talk to others in the organization and get them to understand the impact and criticality of cybersecurity and the programs that she wanted to put in place to support the business, and getting that type of communication and relationship established. So, for example, you're going to meet with the legal team. You're going to meet with the CFO or the office of the CFO and people within there. When you have those engagements, it's got to be the business conversations. When you're looking at that, you're focused on, again, aligning to the business objectives. So, right, we all understand within any organization, we're part of what our core goals are for our business, right? They're there, they're available for you to review, to understand. And in some cases, if public company, of course, you're going to have that available to go back even in greater depth at points. But what it does is it allows you to think about programmatically how you're connecting the dots of your program into those business objectives, right? And then, again, back to the people side of it, you're working to integrate with the different cross-functional teams that you're working with on a day-to-day basis going forward. You're partnering with them so that you're making their lives easier while embedding security in, and you're showing where there are opportunities to hopefully reduce costs while doing so. So that's a key kind of element about, to your point, Ben, about how can I get there? How can I actually show some of the value in doing so? So as I mentioned, it's a big pivot point, but financial literacy is critically important. And it's a critical skill to go through and learn and develop something, again, early in the year to start building the foundation and the plan around, how do you really go through and understand what the budgeting process is within your organization? How do you take that and translate the business value, again, of those security investments associated to them to help you then justify budget requests? Because one of the things we've discussed in the past is, unfortunately, people do a good job in being able to say, hey, these are the new solutions or additional solutions on top of what we're already invested in that we're trying to turn on, and in doing so, we expect these outcomes. Okay, yeah, you can say it. Unfortunately, you don't always get the approval, and then something happens, a data breach, a regulatory finding and penalty associated to it, and all of a sudden the needle moves, and now you're able to get the funding. And it's frustrating that sometimes is what has to happen to actually get the funding that you need. So the more you can do up front to actually translate that again to the true business value, to building those relationships, the key stakeholders, to get that buy-in and socialize, again, what you're trying to accomplish, the better off you're able to get those approvals before, unfortunately, something happens that is now the driver to get the funding that you wanted in the first place, right? So I think those are some of the key aspects, Ben.
Gut reaction to this one. I would have thought CISOs are better at communicating, key stakeholders are more informed, and so they are more receptive. That's what I would imagine. But in reality, in your experience, i.e. what you hear with your ear to the ground, is that the case? Am I being too general to make that assumption?
It's a good assumption. But I think the issue still comes in what historically has been the problem is that, from the board level, in certain cases to the executive leadership level, and again, some organizations, it's still very dependent on what they're thinking about as kind of the latest things that they're hearing about. For example, everyone and their brother, obviously, at this point in time is talking about AI, right? Artificial intelligence. How can we leverage it to drive better efficiencies? How do we drive it to be differentiated in the marketplace, and so on and so forth? This is the latest data security breach in the news. How does that impact us? Does it impact us? Could that be us next? All those type of questions. So it's like there's a shiny object that pops up, unfortunately, at times. There's a game of whack-a-mole that goes on that you have to go back and address each of those different issues. So from an education perspective, I think we all are doing a better job in educating the board and leadership on the role that cyber plays to help from a business sense. And, at times still have to provide the responses to those shiny object moments, if you will. But going back to when you have the opportunity in doing your briefing for the board, as part of that briefing, kind of almost at the onset, like literally get it in and out within like 90 seconds, whatever that latest breach is, assuming you're kind of walking in a time window where something just was out there not that long ago, get it off the table, right? Maybe it didn't impact you, because if it did, most likely, obviously, the communication cycles have been going on already. But still, it's in the back of the mind of someone in the board or leadership team, and you're having that opportunity in the moment, on your platform to try to explain to them what you're doing, how you're advancing things, in essence, kind of, behind the scenes, asking for more, right? Funding, get it off the table to be able to explain, hey, by the way, that latest cyber breach that did this thing and that thing and impacted these organizations, obviously we reviewed, we assessed, and it did not impact us, thankfully. But we also took the opportunity to go back and review our program just to understand, are there certain areas and lessons learned that we did pick up from that still that we want to review, tighten our approach, or identify a gap actually that we need to close off because, it could make us vulnerable to that type of exploit, as an example.
Rob, fascinating stuff and an awful lot of information there that I'm sure people will find incredibly useful. You've been terrific. Are you willing to come back on the show next week?
That would be wonderful. I appreciate the invitation, Ben, as always.
Well, since you're the host, that's perhaps just as well. Happy New Year again. See you later.
See you later now, Ben. Take care.
Thanks for listening to Reimagining Cyber. Remember to subscribe and follow the show. Also, why not leave us a rating and review as well? We'll also leave links to the relevant shows mentioned in this episode in the podcast notes. Goodbye.